Hi, welcome back to a new edition of Green TV. So happy you're aboard because we've got some big news hot off the press, and we're going to drill down a little bit and find out what's not mentioned in the stories under the headlines that Jeff Bezos is pledging to give $1 billion, that's with the B, to the cause of biodiversity, which is wonderful because it's sort of been the hidden, one of the hidden problems as everyone is focused on climate change and oceans, it's all connected, and climate change makes everything worse. But biodiversity and extinction, and we being in the 6th mass extinction, the first one caused by humans. And if you ask people on the street if they know about that, they don't. So there's so much educating to do. And I thought, who better to bring on than my friends at Species Alliance? So I'm very excited to welcome Rhea, Landig, and Monty Thompson. And not only is Rhea the director of speciesalliance.org, but they've also done a movie that is fabulous, a documentary called Call of Life. And Monty directed that. And it's all about the issue of biodiversity loss and species extinction. And I contacted them because I was lucky enough to see it about a decade ago. I was so impressed that they went below the surface and they didn't just make that an issue among others, you know, like kind of fold it in. It was the whole mix. And they went deep enough to talk about 5 different drivers. And I just think it's so important to talk about this now, as many of the funders and environmental activist groups are realizing, you know, it's climate, but it's not only climate, and it's connected. How is it connected? And most of all, what's happening, the truth, which you'll always get on Green TV, and what can people do about it? So I'm very happy to introduce my friends Rhea Landig and Monty Thompson, who work so hard on this issue, way ahead of the pack. And I love getting eco-solutionaries on who have been at this a long time and are finally getting some much needed and much deserved attention. So welcome to the new show. Great to see you. So do you want to start with the film? Because the origins of that will probably give our viewers a sense of how you came together.
The genesis of the movie was when I was in graduate school. I had a professor named David Ulansey, who is actually a historian of religion, but he was all over this issue much sooner than anybody else that I know of. He started a website called massextinction.net, began introducing all of his religion classes or history of religion classes to this issue. And one thing led to another. We brought in a bunch of other people, producer Shara Van Berg and many others, and we formed a nonprofit, Species Alliance, to produce the movie. And that's how it started.
Wonderful. And do you want to jump right into what makes this film what I think so impressive? Because you drill down and you explained it in a very clear way with experts. Stuart Pym, I remember, is one of them. And I just came away learning so much. And even though it was maybe mostly talking heads, it was fascinating.
Yeah, right. I learned so much too. I have no particular credentials. I'm not a scientist. I'm an artist and filmmaker. But when I found out about this, I was so deeply moved. And of course, we interviewed some 30 various experts, scientists and others about this issue. Species loss is, you know, human beings as a species evolved when the earth was abundant. And we've always seen our world as a place of just boundless resources. And we've approached it that way as societies and cultures. We've used everything we could find from the world without consideration, without realizing that these resources are limited. We thought it was unlimited. But within the last maybe 100 years, we've begun to realize that it's a finite system. The earth is a closed system. There's nothing new arriving here. We are
our awareness.
All time what we have. Yeah.
And Rhea, was the making of this film for you sort of the beginning of your interest in this topic, or had you been focused on it for some time?
Hi, Betsy. Just wanted to say thank you for having us here today.
My pleasure.
It was kind of born out of a leadership project I had taken on. I had no idea. I just declared to a room of hundreds of people that I was going to do a project that I wanted to make a difference in the world, particularly with nature and animals, which is my passion. And I wanted it to be through the medium of film. And lo and behold, you know, when you set an intention out, things start to happen. And I was met up again with Monty, who I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. And I asked him what he was doing, and he was finishing up his degree. And he said he was going to make a film about the mass extinction crisis. And I said, well, what's that? And this was in 2006 and 2007. And I said, what is that? And he told me, and I said, well, how come I don't know about it? And he started to explain some of the reasons why the public didn't know about it, which really intrigued me as well. And I knew right then that not only was my project, but I started having a shift in my life from the way I lived my life to my career, all because of this film. And I started raising money and awareness for the making of the film. And that's how I got involved.
And Rhea also rescues all kinds of animals. And if you visit her, I call it Rhea's rehabilitation farm, because there's sheep, there's goats, there's God knows what, and sometimes they're in the house even. So she puts her money where her mouth is in terms of loving animals, probably more than anybody I know. And I have a lot of friends who are animal lovers. So I just wanted to give you that credential right there, because you care, and a lot, and that we need more of you.
Thanks. I think it's important to not only with domestics, but with the natural world. So the little farm that I have doesn't cut out the natural world. You know, we are part of nature. So
part of nature.
It's important. And it's, you know, which kind of brings us back to this headline that, you know, we read this headline, and, you know, after knowing what we know through all of the research in the film and living life and having access to really incredible scientists and indigenous leaders and activists and others, you know, we started kind of delving into this headline a little bit more to start this conversation. And I think I commend you for bringing this topic up, because at Species Alliance, you know, we use our film to educate people, but it's a growing and evolving conversation that thankfully a lot of people are now starting to join in on. You know, we know that climate change is starting to really take presence in our conversations around the world. And but this conversation is almost greater than that. Climate change is one of the drivers of extinction. So when we heard this article, we thought, great headline, but you know, it brings up a lot of questions. You know, we don't want people to think this is handled and left in the lap of billionaires, because this is a conversation for everybody. So thank you for letting us explore this a little more today.
And the initiative is 30 by 30, and that stands for they're going to put this money, which I think they've pledged a total of $5 billion so far. Hopefully they'll be continuing that. They want to preserve 30% of biodiverse spaces, habitats, if you will, by 2030. That's pretty ambitious. Do you think that that's possible? Is it too slow, too fast? But speak for a minute, Monty, to the fact that so few people are aware. I used to go around and ask random questions. My three were, how many of you know who Bill McKibben is? How many of you know what the term 350 means in the context of climate change? And how many of you know which extinction we're in and what's causing it? Almost nobody knew, hardly anybody knew any of them. One guy that I did this at a public talk I was giving in Marin County, very educated population of adults, and one person knew all three, and 199 knew none of those. So it's a real thing, the lack of understanding.
Sure, we talk to people all the time who have never heard the term mass extinction. We say we're in the 6th mass extinction. The reason we say that is because there have been 5 previous mass extinctions on the planet that we know only from the fossil record, because the most recent one was 65 million years ago. That's the most famous one too, where the dinosaurs disappeared. These are mysterious events that are usually caused by an asteroid impact or some period of unusual volcanic activity or things, but all we know is that a large percentage of the species alive at the time simply vanish from the fossil record. And then it takes millions of years for the Earth to recover the same level of biodiversity. Of course, they're new and different species. So
are we
Yes.
humans endangered? Because I contributed to a book called Climate Abandoned, why we're on the endangered list now. And I contributed a chapter about how media is derelict in their duty and not, doing their job to focus on the biggest story of our time in any way that reflects the scope and the severity of
yeah,
plural.
We've become so powerful as a species, the only species, obviously, that has ever sort of taken over the world. The world used to regulate itself, and it did a fine job, but now it's different. We are so many, there's so many of us, and we are so powerful that now the temperature of the air, the temperature of the oceans is a matter of the human psyche. Nature is not totally in control anymore, except for human nature. And as Carl Jung said, what if something goes wrong with the psyche? These are issues that we're grappling with for the first time in our history as a species. Just the realization that we have reached a level where we are in control of things now, and it's up to us.
And can all these issues be addressed at once? Do they have to be addressed all at once?
They do have to be addressed, and that's a really good point. We identify 5 drivers in the movie of biodiversity loss and extinction. 3 of them you're probably familiar with: habitat loss, pollution, and climate change. And those are the direct drivers, but the other 2 are more underlying and insidious. They undergird all of the systems, and that is the human population, overpopulation, and our consumption patterns. Already, if everyone who's alive today used as many resources and produced as much waste as the average American, we would need 5 additional Earths just to support the people who are alive today. And the human population is still growing. And we're not growing as fast as we were some decades ago, but we're still growing. And there's nothing in the media about putting a cap on that. Our economic systems, capitalism especially, it's based on infinite growth. We all assume that there is no limit, and that's not true. There are limits in everything. There are limits to resources.
Are you surprised that things are disintegrating, devolving so quickly? I mean, it's amazing when you think about not just our generation, but in the last 10 to 20 years, those of us who have been paying attention have become aware of the, epic challenge we have on so many fronts. And with the lack of coverage, lack of eco-literacy in this country, how people are just sort of waking up and smelling the carbon right now. And oh my God, how are we going to get off our gases in less than 10 years?
Yeah.
And protect, biodiversity and species and the oceans. And it's amazing how quickly things have gone south. And one of the things about COVID, it showed us how fast things can change. And this is more complex than just wearing a mask, social distancing, and getting a vaccination. And it doesn't bode well in some sense that so much of our country, that fueled by right-wing media lies, don't believe in science. And if you don't believe in COVID science, you certainly don't believe in climate science. And it would be an epic challenge even without that disinformation, actively funded, well-funded, actively, pursued still. But with that, that's what drives me the craziest. Like, we have so much work to do.
Yes, and efforts like this 30-30 effort, they're great, of course. Protecting habitat loss is probably the main driver of biodiversity loss.
And by the way, there's a connection between the bats and COVID and climate change, right?
Oh, sure. Everything, we're much more embedded in nature than we have ever had to realize before.
And that's a message that didn't come across enough. The fact that as humans move into wildlife habitat and chase the bats higher up the trees and, going to cooler areas without so much human development, that makes them be in closer proximity to other wild animals, and that can spread viruses. And oh dear, what could possibly go wrong? Here come humans getting it. And that did not get covered nearly enough in the media, that there's this connection to nature. Of course, it's all connected.
Of course. And it's sorry, Rhea, you're trying to say something?
Well, I just remembering that part of the film, Monty, that that you really captured in a great way. And that was, we likened it to a house of cards. You keep removing card at a time, and pretty soon the whole thing will collapse. So, you know, we are just starting to experience the great loss due to the pandemic and to the effects of climate change. But the losses that we will experience due to this, because of our behaviors, it's going to pale in comparison when we start to have ecosystem collapses.
That's right. Systems in general have this tendency to change their state very, very quickly. This is what system science has learned just in the last few decades. And so the house of cards is an appropriate metaphor because it seems stable, just like ecosystems seem stable. And you can pull out a species here and you can pull out a species there. And yeah, okay, it's all still standing. But eventually you're going to pull out one too many species. And then the whole system will change its shape very, very quickly. And what's interesting about that is there's no predicting. There's no looking at the system and being able to predict what it's going to look like after collapse.
We've never been here before.
No.
We've never been. The Earth may have seen some things like this, but not humans. And we're the ones who can do something about it. And that's where the frustration comes in.
We're the only ones.
Yeah. And we're not doing so well. But maybe all the bad news coming at once will, and with COVID, hopefully this pandemic showed people that
Sure.
things change really quickly, not for the better.
Yeah, well, protecting ecosystems, protecting habitat is a great start. My problem with it is that it's sort of the low-hanging fruit. That's great. We need to do it. But it doesn't do anything to address the reason that these habitats need to be protected. You know, it's sort of like oil companies investing in carbon sequestration technologies when it's their product that's creating the need for these technologies, you know?
Some hypocrisy there. And I know you can't bring back species once they're extinct, but if a place of biodiversity, you know, with a lot of lush life, you know, species is protected, if it's not too late, is that possible? I guess is what I'm asking. Is it possible to preserve and rebuild, or is it once it's gone, it's gone? And Rhea, I think.
Yeah, you know, you brought up Stuart Pym in the intro here, and he's one of our interviewees in the film. And he started with an organization called Saving Species that he created, but it was so successful. Now he did a spinoff called Saving Nature. And he's going into protected, we call them red zones, where there's great losses, and he's having great work, restoration work. But again, it brings up the billionaire project, right? Yes, we know people like organizations like WWF have like actually studied and documented the success rates of preserving, but we really have to preserve them, you know, and have indigenous peoples do the management and make sure that they're involved and they're compensated. You know, that was the model that Stuart Pym championed and does great things. You know, he's not a huge organization. They don't chop her into a red zone and do some like tagging and, you know, field work and then leave. They're actually working with the native people who are connected to the earth and the other peoples there, and they're successfully managing. But again, we have to protect the land. We have to involve the indigenous peoples. I mean, you look at the struggle of indigenous people right now, they are on the forefront of extinction as a human species, you know? And so I think it's important that we have to kind of really examine, what are they talking about? What is their idea of preserving and protecting?
Yeah, what can $1 billion buy in the biodiversity realm? What would you guys do if you were in charge of that money? Maybe go visit the people who live in these places and who would want to preserve it. They just sometimes can't afford to do that because they need to eat.
Yeah, and I also would like to bring up the fact that a lot of these billionaires have these big corporations that they use these precious resources for consumerism. And by the way, we really don't have a true cost economy. The environment is not factored into that price tag. So
while the founder of Amazon, you know, has got all this money, it's killing the Amazon forest in some senses because it is all connected, right? So
Right.
it seems a little bit like a guilt offset. Some are earlier on it. Michael Bloomberg certainly has been, aware of climate change and putting his money where his mouth is for at least a decade or so that I've been paying attention. But Jeff Bezos, a little late to the game. Bill Gates, a little late to the game. Better late than never, but there's so much work to do. And so quickly, we just are running out of time, aren't we? And that urgency hopefully can be channeled into doing not just something, but everything. And your film is a really good place to start. If you want to impress people at a cocktail party, if we ever can have cocktail parties again, and do the little quiz I did. Hey, do you know who Bill McKibben is? Do you know which extinction we're in the midst of? And what's causing it? What's causing it? Don't say who, that'll be a giveaway. It's funny, but it's not, because our eco-illiteracy problem is, it's going to be better because our kids are learning about environmental science and studies in school, but also we can't wait for them to rise up and come into their own professions to save all the damage that we're still piling on.
Yeah, one of the things that makes just buying and preserving swaths of rainforest kind of an easier thing to do than to address the underlying problems that cause that rainforest to need protecting in the first place. It's easier to buy some and protect it, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. Whether protecting 30% of the planet is enough is questionable, though. Biologist Edward O. Wilson says that we need to protect 50% of the planet. They don't really know. They're just picking a number out of a hat. 30.
But let's just start by preserving as much as we can, okay? And
Right.
count it up later.
30 is very ambitious now because we only have about 10 or 12% protected currently, I believe.
Exactly. So the media could do a lot more. That's been something I'm hyper focused on. What kind of, this should be on Netflix, this film, and even though it's 10 years old, it's more relevant than ever. And all the issues, all the drivers certainly are true and truer than ever. So I really encourage anyone watching this to check out Call of Life. And I hope they'll put a link on where people can find that. If not right away, then soon. I know you're doing a little update on the film and your website, and that's great because I think a lot more people are going to be looking for information like this. And, too many Americans, I'll just say that, don't care enough about climate change, starting to wake up, but thanks to Mother Nature screaming at us, hard to ignore. But I don't think anyone would say they want more COVID, right? And because there is a climate COVID connection and destruction of wildlife habitat, conservation, lack of conservation leads to more viruses. They are killing people. And so that's what the message I hope we can take away from this horrible year and a half, that, you want more pandemics, then keep destroying planet Earth.
Absolutely. This was totally predictable and was predicted.
Yes. In fact, there was a whole big binder on it in the White House that Obama left behind and never got read. Surprise by the Trump administration. Are we learning our lessons or not? What do you guys think? And then what can people do besides watch the film? And then I think we'll have to wrap up because I could talk to you all day.
I think we need to continue to evolve as a species into a more compassionate, cooperative species and learn to live with the millions of other species that actually allow us to continue to live. I think we fail to recognize something really basic, is that we all need each other, and that will ensure our survival. And that's at the most selfish of levels,
That we need nature more than nature needs us. Hello.
Exactly. I think we need to continue to put pressure on government and policymakers and corporations to keep making the changes necessary to have a fair and just and healthy planet. And all of our issues are strung together. So
Absolutely.
we need to tackle it all.
Yeah. It's a web, as someone once, I'm trying to be.
It's a mess is what it is.
It sure is. Once you unravel the part over here, it all comes unraveling. It feels like without being hyperbolic, all ecosystems are in collapse right now. And that's why when there's all these podcasts now about climate change, I say, great, better than none, but it's not just climate.
Right.
So it's a great
Not just
example.
And it's also not just
about climate, you're missing the rest surrounding it.
Right. And it's also not just about protecting this species or that species. It's about protecting all species at once and
web of life.
systems that those species are part of and that we are also part of.
the web of life. You can't replace it. You can't buy it.
Right.
Thank you so much, Monty and Rhea. Hopefully we can post some pictures of Rhea on her rehabilitation farm. She's got, like I said, the biggest heart towards humans too, but animals mostly. And so she really is the real deal. And thank you for all the animals you saved, countless, I'm sure, Rhea. And Monty, just thank you for your vision for this film.
Thank you.
It's a must-see, and I'm going to tell people about it because finally the money is going into the issue, and it's a little late, but better late, right?
Thank you, Betsy.
All right, it's getting late, so I'll have to say goodbye. And want to invite our viewers to please go to greentv.com and watch these interviews. I really only get the best of the best, and share them. And please subscribe, because the more people we get watching greentv.com, the sooner we can get sponsors, the sooner we can get a little bit more staff, the sooner we can get towards our goal, which is nothing less than 24/7. Be a green news network. Why not? Just like CNN. Turn us on, you'll see live humans like us talking, not just 1 a day, but 1 hour a day, but 24. And we need to get there fast. So that's up to you, our viewers. So thanks for participating. We need your active support. See you next time.